Welcome to Whips in the Dungeon. I want to talk a little bit about the progression that happens as you become more skilled, a little more mileage with your throwing. I mean, we all get a fantasize about throwing the whip. We develop a passion for it. For some, it becomes a fetish. For some that are OCD, you end up kind of collecting and going whip crazy. So you start by learning those 4 techniques: the bow and arrow, coming over the shoulder, off the shoulder, horizontal, and the forward figure 8, okay? So that mileage, you work with those 4 techniques. You may pare that down to only 2 techniques where you have your favorite static technique and your favorite dynamic technique. For me, my favorite static technique is just off the shoulder. And then my favorite dynamic technique is the forward figure 8, okay? So you might pare those down to those 2 techniques and put lots of mileage and lots of time and practice into perfecting those 2 techniques, okay? And part of that journey of perfecting those 2 techniques is getting enough mileage so that your release point is consistent, your finishing point is consistent, and at some point the whip feels like it's an extension of your arm. So it's just, it becomes an extension of your arm. You add footwork, you add body movement, you add rhythm whips to stay in time with the music. You've got a lot going on. But do you? No, because then you move beyond that. And what is moving beyond having the whip become an extension of your arm? Okay, I'm going to say we're going to relate it to Gong theory. In Gong theory, you get to a point where you can move energy with your mind. We're moving that energy using the whip as a tool, but I am not thinking about what's going on with the whip. I look, I point, my mind sends the whip out, and the whip finishes. I read the body language. If the whip catcher's telling me more, I send the whip out with more energy. So I'm actually visualizing moving energy with my mind. I look, I point, the whip finishes. I look, I point, the whip finishes. So it's beyond, the step beyond, I would contend, the whip becoming an extension of your arm, is for the whip to become an extension of your mind. You're hyper-focused, you look, you point, the whip finishes, and the whip adjusts based on what your mind is telling the whip to do. I know that's kind of philosophical and esoteric, but I don't know any other way to explain it, because we get in whip practice and I break down all of these elements of everything that's going on, right? And you may have 1,000 things going on. You may be in time to the music, you know, you're in time to Rammstein, you're throwing, your release point's there, you're doing things with your footwork, you're taking a little off the whip by the step back, you're doing all of this stuff. You're dancing, you're jigging, you're weaving, you know, you're cracking the whip with your hip, you're doing all this stuff, right? No, you're not thinking about any of that. Your mind is looking, it's pointing, the whip is finishing. Your mind looks, points, the whip finishes. None of that stuff are you thinking about. You're focusing solely on the whip catcher and where the whip finishes, and you're making adjustments. That's why when a whip catcher isn't standing still, but they're dancing around a little bit as well, you are able to make small adjustments and still stay on target with them, because your mind is adjusting your vision, your focus, your point, where that whip's going, and you're finishing it. Right now, I'm finishing that whip right where I'm looking at, which is right at the camera. And I'm telling you, we're moving energy with our mind. As always, thanks for watching Whips in the Dungeon.